back to the Fertility Season 5. Today we are joined with Priyanka Jain, who is the co-founder and CEO of Evvy. Priya founded Evvy after years of experiencing her own mystery symptoms and discovering the significant gap in women's health research. Priyanka comes from a professional background in tech and nonprofits and launched Evvy during the pandemic, which I am sure was a wild ride, not to mention working in really a space that's underserved. Thank you so much for being with us today. We cannot wait to hear about your personal journey to launching Evvy and really how the company's evolved since.
Yeah, oh my gosh, thank you guys so much. I'm such a big fan of the community you've built and the amazing education that you guys do.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
I know, right?
You're in New York City, right? So you're
Yeah.
calling in from New York today. What does your typical day look like as CEO of Evvy, of this awesome brand?
Well, that is not where I thought we were going to start. Wow. Okay. I'm like, what is my
Tell
typical
us
day?
about
It's a
your
question
day.
I don't know if anyone can answer. I'm like, my day is that I spend from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. unblocking my team and putting out fires and being in meetings and solving problems and being given information that we have to parse through and kind of come up with a solution for and come up with new ideas. And then from 6 to 10 p.m., I do my own job of like all the things that I said I was going to do after every meeting. And then you do it again every day.
Yep.
But like what you do during the day is it's never the same, but in a way that honestly, I feel very lucky. Like I love that. I love to feel like I'm firing on all cylinders and getting to think about product and growth and the customer and the business and the financials. I feel very lucky that I get to do all of those
That just proves what you said right before we hit record of just being so passionate about this space and this community, like absolutely dedicating your life to this.
Literally.
And so super interested to hear a little bit about how Evvy came about. I know you have a background in tech, and it looks like when I was looking, maybe your previous job exposed a little bit more about like the women disparities in like tech and just healthcare.
100%. So I always joke that like the only through line you can draw in my life is like women, just like women deserve better, period. And just a frustration with whether it was lack of access to education for girls around the world or a lack of access to healthcare entirely. Or when I was in college feeling like, why is it so much harder for women to get jobs and why are our resumes looked at differently? To what you were alluding to is I spent the 5 years after school at an AI company that was trying to replace the resume with something less biased, more predictive of job success. I think we all know that where you went to school and what your GPA were are not the best predictors of what you can do in the world. And had an amazing journey there, and learned so much about really like all that data can do is what you tell it, right? Data only knows the history. And what was so crazy is in that job, when you look at people who were successful, they were all men. So you're training algorithms on middle-aged, mid-sized white men named John, and then you're trying to use that algorithm on people who look like us. And guess what? It's not that effective. And when my own journey of starting Evvy was, I think, like many people in women's health, was being a patient and feeling like I went to the doctor one too many times and couldn't get answers. I was dealing with a myriad of my own symptoms that were like really debilitating, both kind of socially and physically. And when I I live in New York City. I went to every, doctor who says they can solve your problem, did every test, drew so many tubes of blood, and everybody would call me and say, your results look perfect. I mean, I'm sure we all have had this journey, right? And this feeling of like, how on earth can you tell me that I'm fine and that my results are perfect? And like, look at me, something is so clear. It turns out I have an autoimmune condition, which 80% of autoimmune disease patients are women. And so obviously we don't know anything about it. But when I started to do my own research and, my background's in data science and machine learning, I was sitting in my data science job being like, okay, we can use data to predict all of these things. So why can nobody use data to help me understand my own body? That was when I found out that we didn't study women in the US until 1993. And that to this day, women are diagnosed
crazy.
On average 4 years later than men for over 700 of the same diseases, including cancers, right? So you're just like, essentially our entire understanding of health and disease is based on middle-aged, mid-sized white men, right? Kind of like it was in the hiring world. I was like, wow, we're doing the same thing in healthcare, and holy crap, this has a huge impact, right? It means that we are going to the doctor and we're not getting answers. And my kind of fundamental hypothesis was this idea that the female body is giving us so many signals, right? And it's funny because I feel like in on podcasts like this and in corners of the internet, we are kind of attuned to like when something is off, but then there isn't actually like a tool to measure it or to validate that. But I was like, there must be so many signals that our bodies are giving off, but we just don't know how to measure and track because we just never studied women. And what if we actually could measure and track those female specific biomarkers? Could we actually finally do a better job predicting risk of disease or diagnosing disease or treating disease in women? And it just turns out that the vaginal microbiome is a perfect example of what I'm describing. So I will.
That was what I was so interested in.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm interested in all of it.
Everything.
Just a little side note, I actually work in women's health ops in a healthcare facility, large organization.
No way.
Yes, so
Wow.
aligned and love what you're doing. But how did you land on vaginal microbiome?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't wake up every day thinking about that, but
Yeah, right.
there's really two reasons. So one is like when I was talking to patients and doctors, I could not escape the vaginal microbiome. And it turns out that vaginal discomfort is the leading reason women seek healthcare advice in the US. And when we go to the doctor, we are more likely to be misdiagnosed than correctly diagnosed. And we are more likely not to get better than to get better. So what you're left with is an incredibly prevalent and incredibly frustrating condition that is horribly managed by the healthcare system. And so that felt like, okay, there's clearly a problem to be solved there. Why don't we have better testing tools, better solutions? It felt like there was something missing. But what really hooked me was I was reading paper after paper after paper on how essentially the vaginal microbiome is not just the cause of symptoms and infections that drive us to the doctor, right? If you think about it, the vagina is this open canal, right, between the entire reproductive system. And then on the other side, every pathogen that exists in the world, right? Every bacteria. And it turns out we've actually co-evolved with our vaginal microbiome to act as this really important barrier for us. So what it does is basically when you have a healthy vaginal microbiome, when it's dominated by these good bacteria, the most common of which people have probably heard of, lactobacilli, right? Certain species, it's actually very important which species and strains, but certain species and strains of lactobacilli that keep the vaginal environment acidic. I'm sure people have heard of vaginal pH. Essentially, it makes it so that those bad bacteria, when they get into the vagina, they can't survive. It's too acidic and there's no room for them. And so the vaginal microbiome actually, when we say the vagina is a self-cleaning oven, what we really mean is that the vaginal microbiome is keeping the vaginal environment safe and clean. But God forbid you have sex with someone new, or you sit in your swimsuit for too long, or you have a long period, or anything elevates that pH, those bad bacteria can start to replicate. And what you then as a patient experience is bacterial vaginosis and yeast infections and UTIs. But what we're not thinking about is we've now also lost that protective layer for the rest of the system. And what the research I was reading was showing is that then you have essentially affected outcomes across infertility. And I'll dive into this obviously a lot more, but specifically IVF success rates, preterm birth rates, miscarriage, recurrent pregnancy loss, cervical cancer progression, STI acquisition. I mean, basically what I realized is that the vaginal microbiome is modulating inflammation of the entire reproductive tract. So any women's health outcome that is affected by inflammation of the reproductive tract is modulated by the vaginal microbiome. And I was like, in what universe is nobody using data on this? We have sequencing technologies. We're looking at the gut microbiome, the soil microbiome.
Yeah.
You're telling me nobody is looking at something that you can swab yourself and that could help the number one reason women go to the doctor and then also predict and improve outcomes in essentially every area of women's health. And we're not doing anything today. It just felt like too good to be true almost.
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy.
You're like, how am I the only person thinking about this?
But then I was like, okay, now I have to start and build and run a vagina company in like, you know, in 2020. So like, that's probably why.
But I love that. And I heard you say on another podcast, you were saying along the lines of just, oh my gosh, you were saying something along the lines, that like modern physicians, OBGYNs, even REIs, they don't really validate everything you just said. So like, for example, they're saying, well, like urea plasma, would that be in your realm?
Totally.
Okay, so urea plasma. I've had 8 miscarriages personally. I go to my OBGYN and say, I found this on this tiny little site of the internet that maybe it could be urea plasma that's causing this loss. No, you're wild and crazy. We won't test for that here.
100%.
Or like working with my REI, and Amanda experiences too, of like, right before an IVF transfer, they're doing these like swabs because we begged for them. And then the results will come back showing something. Yeah, but everybody has that. So like you're
Yeah.
spot on with, and so Evvy allows that autonomy to be put in the patient's hand, right?
Yeah. And look, like the reality is, I always say, like, I don't think any doctor is malicious, right? Like, I really think that doctors are operating with the tools and the information that they have. And the reality is that we as a society have not invested in creating the tools, validating the tools, producing the data for a doctor to reasonably look into a patient's eyes and say, this is, we don't know yet, right? And so I think that's what's so exciting about Evvy is that we can work with patients and we can build the data, we can build the validation. And now what we're seeing is that now there are 2,000 practitioners across the country that use Evvy, right? Like, and now we can change
Awesome.
the narrative, but it's really hard to start there. You have to start with building the data and proving these individual things, because I think, yeah, unfortunately, like nobody was taught about the vaginal microbiome in medical school, right? So like we just gotta do the data, and we gotta educate.
So you're working with these physicians that are incredible, to your point, like do no harm, incredible. They're trying to do the best for the patient, but in med school, you said it, like vaginal and microbiome never really like were in the same sentence together, so they don't feel confident making those recommendations. So for listeners who have no idea what we're talking about,
Yeah, it'd be like more like me. I have no medical background at all, nothing. Like, tell me exactly what this is truly.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. So basically, what I was
dumb it down for us.
so if you have a disrupted or dysbiotic vaginal microbiome, essentially you have an inflamed vagina, which is the entrance to your reproductive tract. And so now those pathogens are traveling up, they're making a home, they're causing infection and inflammation. And are any of us surprised that you see far reduced implantation rates in an inflamed and infected environment? Right? It's not that surprising. And it's funny because when I talk to most REIs, they're like, yeah, I completely get it. I see this in my own practice. I understand. Theoretically, this makes a lot of sense to me. I see this clinically. There's just never been a commercially available test that could make what they've seen in the research available to them in the clinic. And there's never been something where there's a clear protocol of how to use it in the clinic or how to recommend it to patients. And so what we started very much focused on patients with vaginal symptoms. That was obviously our early adopter. But very quickly, our fastest growing segment of the business became women who were trying to get pregnant, because to exactly your point, Catherine, the fertility patient is the smartest patient on earth. That woman has read every study,
everything.
Like, you know, and so they were reading the same studies that I read when I started Evvy, and they were like, oh, this is gonna give me answers. And so we didn't even have a fertility solution, but it was quickly this fastest growing area. And we were like, okay, what is the study we need to run to validate this? Who are the advisors that we need? And now, I mean, I'm so proud that the largest network of fertility clinics in the US is an investor in Evvy, and their head of innovation and their head REI are working with us on validating exactly where it can fit in the protocols and how to use it. So now I'm like, oh, we have the world's largest data set ever on the vaginal microbiome. We serve over 100,000 patients across the US today. We've discovered double the number of genomes than anyone even knew existed in the vagina before Evvy. And so now we can actually validate these tools for patients. And to your question, really what we're trying to do is help a fertility patient in a few different parts of the journey. I always say to my friends, I'm of the age in which all of my friends are having children. And I'm always like, if you're taking a prenatal, you should also look at your vaginal microbiome. Like, to me, it's such a simple test.
I know, right? Come on.
Why would you not look? Like, let's just look. It's so easy. And if there's something wrong, we can fix it. And then maybe we'll avoid months of unnecessary suffering. Then for my friends who are struggling, and also their doctors have run a bunch of tests that do not include the vaginal microbiome, I'm like, you should look at the vaginal microbiome. Because again, if you have inflammation and infection, it's not going to solve the problem for everyone, of course. But if there's any percent of those people that we can capture with something as simple as Evvy, why are we not doing it?
For sure.
And then lastly, if you are actually in a fertility clinic about to pay thousands of dollars for a procedure, why would we not check this before and make sure it's not standing in your way? And so my hope is that in all of those scenarios, we can leverage something that can be done at home, affordably, easily, reliably. Like, we have studies that show that we can improve this. Like, can we get can we make that available to all of these patients who are just not being given this information today, right? And so
For
that
sure.
is in the fertility space. I think there is just nothing makes me more upset than unexplained infertility. Truly, unexplained
Literally the
truly
worst.
means not researched.
Right.
And it's like
It's the
And,
worst.
yeah, now it's 2025, almost 2026, and we're finally realizing like if you're diagnosed with unexplained, it just means they don't know what's wrong with you. It
yeah,
doesn't mean
Yeah.
that like there's nothing
it's
wrong.
actually unexplained. Of course, it's explainable. It's just that you have to invest in looking at all the markers and figuring out what's wrong and like who is
Yeah.
funding that science. And like in 2025, who is funding that science? And so in my mind, again, we will not solve 100% of unexplained infertility, but we will solve some percent of it.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
I think
And it
too,
should just be a first step. Like that should just easily just be everyone's first step is to at least do this. And if
Right.
it doesn't work, then like it doesn't work and you still do the extra treatments and all the
Right.
things. But if it does, look how much easier that just got. Like
yeah, and two things that you hit on that I think is huge: infertility or not infertility at home. Like
Yeah.
these patients can do this at
Huge.
home. 'Cause I actually run a sexual medicine clinic, which is super in line with what you're talking
Yeah.
about. And like women coming in for vaginal pain of all ages, from 20 to 80 years old. Like it is debilitating
Yeah.
in your day to day.
Wait, we should talk about collaborating on that because those are our patients too.
I've already had so many wheels spinning in my head, so we will talk for sure. But like, for example, that we have to create that environment to be so sensitive to the patient.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're coming in and someone's swabbing your
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It could be
at
so
home,
awkward.
yeah, can you tell us if someone's like, oh my gosh, I want to do this tomorrow because we have been inundated with these requests.
For
How does
sure.
it work? You go on your
Yeah.
website, you get it shipped to you. What does that look like?
Great question. So you go to evvy.com, it's evvy.com. You can order the test yourself. It's in all 50 states and also in Canada. You get the test back to your house. It's a simple Q-tip swab of the vagina, essentially. I always joke it's even easier than putting in a tampon. It takes 20 seconds. You put it
Amazing.
back in the little tube, you mail it back to our lab, and then we do something fancy called metagenomic sequencing, which basically just means that we're able to look for everything that's there. Instead of, I'm sure, when you go to the doctor and they're like, I looked for this one thing and that one thing, we're able to say, if it's there, we'll find it.
Yeah.
And then we come back to the patient with a full report. If you're trying to conceive, we actually developed 4 validated specific scores that are specifically look at what is known to be associated with positive and negative fertility outcomes. And if people are interested, the 4 scores, you can cut this if nobody's interested.
Interested.
We're interested. I want to know.
The person listening to this podcast is interested. I'll let you
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
Okay, great. So the 4 scores that we've identified that are associated with positive and negative fertility outcomes. And these are outcomes across natural infertility when people are trying to get pregnant naturally, and then as well as assisted reproductive technology. So the first score is what we call the protective score, which is what % of your vagina is good bacteria. The higher the % of that good bacteria, the more likely it is that your vaginal environment has low inflammation and high acidity and is conducive to a healthy implantation and pregnancy. The second one is diversity. Interestingly, I feel like in the gut microbiome, you want diversity. In the vaginal microbiome, you actually do not want diversity. You want dominance. You want the good guys to be super, super dominant, and you want almost nothing else. And if there is anything else, just very, very low levels. So we'll give you a score of how diverse it is. And for each of the scores, there's also the optimal ranges based on this fertility specific research. The third score that we look at is what we call the fertility disruptors. So these are specific pathogens that have been shown to impact fertility outcomes, ureaplasma being one of them. It's on the more novel side in terms of actual publications. Although
Pause for a second. So you're telling me if a patient wants to get ureaplasma tested, that is inclusive of the Evvy?
Oh, of course. Of course.
It is
That's
so
wild.
hard to find
To get it
a Evvy that will test you.
No,
Yeah.
I'll send you 100%. Yeah, it's in our, we do, if you add on the expanded panel of the test, we do both PCR and NGS testing for it. And so that means that we are the most likely to catch it between the two and actually know if it's present. But yes, that is one of the fertility disruptors. There's actually also a few other ones that have been shown to be negatively associated. And we know the thresholds as well, at which point they become problematic.
Wow.
And then the last thing is STIs. So we also are able to do STI testing all on the same swab. And we obviously know that having the presence of an STI makes it less likely for someone to successfully conceive. And so we're able to not only report on the whole vaginal microbiome, but then also those 4 scores for people who are trying to conceive. And what I love is that then for in almost all the states around the country, we are working on the last few, we can also then design a personalized treatment program of exactly the treatments and ingredients that are most likely to shift that patient's vaginal microbiome. So the right antibiotic to treat the pathogenic bacteria, the right vaginal probiotic that has the strains that you're missing, if somebody needs vaginal estrogen or hyaluronic acid or boric acid to break down the biofilms, we're able to compound all of those prescription treatments and send them to the patient's door. And we actually published a peer-reviewed study this year showing that our care platform radically improves outcomes compared to anything in the standard of care. And so basically patients can get kind of the end-to-end full comprehensive test and then also the treatment to improve it.
This is wild.
Insane. I am like blown away, and I'm so mad that I did not know this like a year ago. Like literally.
Me too. I'm like, we're working on it. I'm doing this.
I know.
So
No, this
I
is
had
incredible.
a thought because so just as an end user, right? Typically women, I think, especially listening to this podcast, are probably going to reach out to a product like Evvy, like probably right after a loss or after like excessive years of infertility and trying and trying. Is there, I mean, I know that this probably isn't something you guys have studied, but maybe there is. Do you find that maybe waiting X amount of time after a miscarriage before doing a swab? Because I feel like there's got to be crazy, like craziness going on at that
Or
point.
even like the hormones through like an IVF treatment. Could that
Like
shift
a failed
anything? Like,
transfer.
is that an accurate then result, or does that skew it?
It's such a good question. In terms of the miscarriage, I actually don't know if I've ever seen any research for me to like know how to for sure answer that question. My guess, based on just my own expertise of the vaginal microbiome, would be that it likely is. So the vaginal microbiome is very hormone affected, meaning like if there are high levels of estrogen that actually feeds the good bacteria, when estrogen levels drop, then you do see that the good bacteria, the lactobacilli, suffer. And so you might see that there is like a temporary drop in vaginal health that might be associated with something like a pregnancy loss. But what I would say is like that would be something I would keep tabs on because it would basically be like I would want to know, is it rebounding? If it's not rebounding, can I support it? Does it need vaginal estrogen to actually correctly rebalance so that you don't end up in a state of no good bacteria with inactive?
Well, I'm just thinking like recurrent loss. Like, okay, maybe it was triggered by the first loss and you never got back to, you know, baseline.
I mean, look, as I feel about all of these things, like nothing I am saying are there enough like massive peer-reviewed studies on. Like it is so, and of course that's what I want. It's just like we're trying to fund this research ourselves, and there's only so many venture capital dollars you can raise to do research. But we are actually doing the study that you asked about, Amanda, about the exactly when in the cycle you should take the sample, how it's affected during the cycle. We're actually right now running a large scale study with almost 5 or 10 different clinics across the country where we're taking samples at the very beginning of the cycle, so days 1 through 3, and then on the day of the transfer, the morning of the transfer. And so basically we'll see how much does it change in that time period, how much the hormones affect it, and are one or both of those swabs more predictive of the outcome so that then we can actually guide patients much more precisely on exactly when to take it and how.
That's incredible.
So we're very excited. We actually
that's huge. I feel like that's pivotal. Like that is really, really cool.
And I understand why doctors are waiting for that information. You know, I think that like if you're not actively in a cycle, it's easy to take the Evvy test at home and do it on your own time. I think for us to be in the clinic, we need to have the answers to these exact questions, which is why we're running these studies. But we just actually, I think last week got the first kind of preliminary data. And in the IRB study, we're like allowed to do the first preliminary analysis soon. And so we're really excited to do that.
That's amazing. I know you mentioned BV and like yeast infections and UTIs. Have you seen like any reports of someone doing your test and then coming back and saying like, I've got it under control. It's not just the typical like women have UTIs, women have yeast infection. Like, have you seen that really like make a difference?
Oh my gosh, 100%, right? Because essentially what we do is we don't just, if you think about what we do today in the healthcare system, right? You have a bad bacteria in the vagina, you throw an antibiotic at it. You essentially
Never
destroy them.
follow up.
And
Yeah.
then you're like, I hope something different grows back. And like, guess what?
Yeah.
That's not what happens. The bad bacteria often just regrow. And what you see is that there are, depending on the study you look at, 30 to 80% recurrence rates within 3 to 6 months, right? And so what we're doing is we're saying we're not just going to treat the bad bacteria. We're also going to reintroduce the good bacteria. We're going to make sure they have the supplements that they need to survive. And then we're going to keep tabs on it and make sure it stays there. And if pathogens start to take over, we'll handle them earlier. So we're not dealing with a state of 100% disruptive bacteria. We're dealing with a state of 5 or 10, right? And so we're able to kind of keep people in that healthier state over time by kind of monitoring it and making sure we don't wait until, I mean, literally the clinical criteria of it smells. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
That's the clinical criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not making this up, I swear to God.
I believe
The
you.
gold standard way to diagnose vaginal infections in the clinic is something called the Amsel criteria, of which you're looking at the swab under the microscope, trying to like look at the shapes, which I'm like, it's 2025. Also, a lot of doctors don't have microscopes anymore. You're like looking at pH, which as we all know is affected by everything, semen, menstrual blood, you name it. And then we're doing what's called the whiff test, in which you are literally smelling the swab. And
I am not okay. That I
no, it's offensive. This is the number one reason women go to the doctor in America. I mean, there are PCR tests, but the PCR test is looking for 3 things. And so if the pathogen causing your symptoms isn't one of those 3 things, we're like, we don't know. We'll just give you an antibiotic anyways and hope it changes. And so, I mean, vaginal health there's a lot to do, but I mean, we have been marching on the train for 5 years now. And so I hope that, I mean, now that we have all of this data, we are lucky that we get to present it at all of the major clinical conferences. So at ACOG, the American College of OBGYNs, or ASRM, where a lot of the fertility doctors are, or the Infectious Disease Society of OBGYNs. Like, we are presenting our data at all of these conferences every year so we can educate doctors on what we're actually seeing.
That's amazing. And I took a screenshot because I don't want to say it wrong, but you guys just won like a ton of awards, right? Like you just won like Entrepreneur of the Year, you specifically. And then Evvy, like, aren't you guys like some like crazy stuff, right? Like most innovative company, Forbes 30 under 30, most exceptional entrepreneurs in 2024. You're amazing.
No, I
literally
mean,
killing it.
we, well, first of all, I have 2 amazing co-founders, so it's definitely not just me, and we have an amazing team of 25, mostly women, who are really, I can't explain how hard everybody is working at this company to make what we do possible. But we also have a long way to go. You know what I mean? There's like so much more for us to do, and I feel like we're so lucky that we get to do this, and now we got to keep earning the right to keep getting to do it. And so that means we got to hit all the milestones. We got to overperform because we're women. We got to raise money from men for our vagina company. We will do
it. So true.
Episode title.
Yeah.
Evvy, let's raise money for men for our vagina company. Okay,
but it's true.
The average listeners just listening, they're like, we want to do it. We understand it may not be in our OBGYN clinic. How do they find you? How can they order it? And we'll put it all in the show notes.
Yeah. So it's Evvy.com, EVVY.com. We're at Evvy on Instagram and at Evvy Bio on TikTok. I am biased, but I think we have an amazing social presence. We do so much amazing education.
You do.
It's so funny. Our TikTok makes me laugh all day, every day. So I highly recommend if you're just interested in learning about women's health. I think we do an amazing job on those platforms. We have a lot of great content related to the vaginal microbiome and fertility on our website, on our blog. We invest a ton in science and medical content that answers questions that women have. And then if you want to take the test, you can get it at Evvy, and I'm going to get you a discount code for the What the Fertility podcast community.
That is incredible.
Well,
I know.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot.
I've learned so much. I know nothing about when it comes to medical stuff. It's like all cats like realm. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And thank you so much for being here and everything that you're doing in the community too.
I mean, right back at you guys, seriously. So much. I mean, look, Evvy exists because patients wanted to be more educated, right? We are only able to do what we do because patients are taking control, and you guys are helping people do that. So thank you.
Thank you.